The ocean never kept secrets. It merely whispered them gently over centuries through storms and stillness, waiting for someone stubborn enough to listen. For most people, the ocean was sound and movement, waves crashing, gulls crying, wind dragging lines across water. But to a handful of families scattered through history, the ocean had a voice. Not metaphorically, not romantically. They believed, quietly, carefully, that the ocean could remember, that it could cradle grief, that it hummed lullabies when humanity was too exhausted to hum to itself. The story didn't begin with science or sailors or famous American harbors. It began much earlier, before GPS, before weather satellites, before steamships roared. It began with mothers standing on wooden docks, holding children who would never see their fathers again. It began with the Atlantic, ancient and unsympathetic, holding entire chapters of human history beneath its restless surface. But the part Americans rarely heard, the part history never loved enough to tell, was how every generation heard the ocean differently. And in the year 1851, a boy named Caleb Carter heard it most clearly. Caleb belonged to a fishing family in Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. His father was neither a great hero nor a tragic legend. He was precisely what history liked to forget: ordinary. A man whose hands were made of rope and salt. A man who measured time by tides and seasons, not clocks and calendars. Caleb was 12 the first time he realized the sea spoke songs. It happened on a wind-torn April dawn when fog smothered the harbor and the world looked unfinished. He stood barefoot on the rugged dock, holding a chipped wooden bucket, his breath forming pale ghosts in the air. His father's ship, the Mercy Jane, had vanished into fog 3 days earlier with no word. His mother hadn't spoken since sunrise. Fishermen whispered old fears in cautious New England voices: pirates, storms, wreckage, God's judgment, the usual things people feared when they ran out of rational explanations. Caleb wandered to the edge of the pier, toes curling around the wood slick with seawater, and listened. Not out of faith, out of desperation. He wanted a sign. He wanted something to tell him his father wasn't gone. At first, all he heard was water. It lapped gently, as if nothing in the world could possibly be wrong. Then, beneath the rhythm, there came something else. Not a voice exactly, not words, more like a melody, gentle, patient, sad. It reminded him of his mother when she hummed while sewing, back before worry became her only occupation. Caleb froze. The sound was too structured to be wind, too soft to be ship rigging, too warm to be imagined. He leaned forward. The wooden pier creaked beneath him. The melody changed, not louder, closer, like a lullaby meant specifically for him. And in that strange, breathtaking moment, Caleb believed the ocean cared. He didn't tell anyone. Who would he tell? New England men were carved from skepticism. Women survived by being rational. Children learned early that imagination was a luxury rarely afforded to the poor. But that night, 3 fishing boats dragged the Mercy Jane back into harbor, damaged but alive. His father emerged from the deck, stunned, exhausted, crying in a way Caleb had never seen. A sudden, violent storm had crushed their sails, and they barely clung to life. They drifted, powerless, certain death was coming. The crew swore that in the darkest hour, they heard something too. Not a wail, not wind, not hallucination. A low, soothing hum that calmed panic before it could destroy them. They didn't tell anyone else either. Some things you don't say out loud unless you are ready to be laughed at or believed too deeply. Years passed. Caleb grew. America grew faster. The century sharpened. Telegraph wires crawled like spiderwebs across landscapes. Railroads split wilderness. Factories roared, replacing quiet farm evenings with metallic thunder. People believed in invention, in industry, in the power of human certainty. But the ocean remained untamed. It swallowed ships, it swallowed promises, it swallowed confidence. Yet sometimes it sang, and generations noticed. By the late 1800s, sailors in New York reported comforting tones during nights of hopeless drift. Immigrants sailing towards Ellis Island whispered about waves that calmed terrified children who hadn't slept since leaving Europe. Whaling crews recounted eerie hums near Nantucket before storms broke, the sound warning them to turn back. Scientists called it nonsense. Clergy called it a miracle. Journalists didn't know what to call it, so they ignored it. But the ocean kept singing. Until 1906, when San Francisco burned and trembled, the Pacific roared with sorrow that echoed across coastlines. In 1912, when the Titanic sank and grief stretched across the Atlantic like a black veil, survivors swore the water hummed gently while they waited among the dead and dying. During World War I, soldiers crossing the ocean towards a future they might not survive heard humming beneath the hulls, steady, comforting, heartbreakingly human. There was no pattern, no religion owned it, no culture claimed it.
The ocean simply chose moments when humanity most needed to know it wasn't entirely alone. But the story of how we learned to listen properly belongs to America at the turn of a new age, an era of radios, war, loss, and the stubborn human refusal to surrender hope. Which brings us to Eleanor Wright. Eleanor was the kind of American history typically forgets because she didn't lead a nation, win a war, or invent something that made headlines. She was a radio operator in 1939, working night shifts on merchant ships carrying food, mail, and soldiers across increasingly dangerous Atlantic waters. She was also a widow. Her husband, Thomas, died in a factory accident the year before, leaving behind a silence louder than any storm. Eleanor did not pray. She did not hope. She did not cry where anyone could see. She learned instead to survive. One night in 1940, as war tightened across Europe, and whispers of global catastrophe settled into full, undeniable truth, Eleanor found herself alone in the radio room of a supply ship, the world outside wrapped in darkness. Her job was simple: listen for distress calls, static signals, coded messages, record, respond, repeat. But that night, the static wasn't empty. It pulsed. Softly, rhythmically, almost musically. At first, she thought it was equipment failure. She adjusted dials, recalibrated frequencies, tapped the machine. Nothing changed. The hum persisted, steady and low, resonating in her chest, not just her ears. She whispered under her breath, almost angrily, "Stop!" It didn't. Instead, the sound shifted, smoother, warmer, gentler, like someone was trying to hold her without touching her. She closed her eyes. For the first time since Thomas died, her hands shook, not from fear, but from something more dangerous, comfort. And she heard herself whisper, "I miss him." The hum softened, as if answering, and Eleanor Wright, rational American radio officer, practical widow, disciplined professional, did something she would never quite forgive herself for. She cried. A quiet cry, a tired cry, the kind of cry you give the universe when you are too exhausted to fight anymore. The next morning, another nearby ship reported the same strange humming over their radios right before a German U-boat surfaced in their path. The hum vanished the second they changed course. Coincidence, the Navy insisted. Luck, the officers said. But Eleanor knew better. Not because she wanted magic, because she heard compassion. Machines didn't care. War didn't care. Logic didn't care. But the ocean sometimes did. By the mid-1940s, rumors spread through the maritime world. Not loudly, not publicly. In murmured conversations, in late-night mess halls, in tired letters written halfway across the world, sailors spoke of the ocean's lullaby, a strange, beautiful sound that appeared when hope seemed dangerously close to snapping. Older captains dismissed it. Younger men secretly waited for it. Everyone pretended it wasn't real. Yet, story by story, crossing by crossing, decade by decade, the legend grew alongside real events, wars ending, families reuniting, America changing, oceans filling with the weight of nuclear submarines instead of wooden ships. Science advanced. Satellites watched the weather now. Sonar mapped depths we once feared. But technology did not silence the lullabies. If anything, it recorded them. The first classified naval recordings appeared in the 1960s. They weren't whale songs. They weren't geological movement. They weren't sound illusions. They were melodies. Slow, measured, heartbreaking. Engineers couldn't identify them. Physicists couldn't classify them. Admirals quietly locked them away. Not because they were dangerous, because they were unexplainable. And governments prefer mysteries that obey rules. Yet, history has a strange loyalty to the things humans quietly share among themselves. Nothing stays locked forever. A curious oceanographer in the 1980s dug up the hidden recordings. A journalist in the 1990s heard rumors. A grieving American mother who lost a son at sea spoke publicly of the lullaby she swore she heard when writing to him over the roaring waves. By the early 2000s, fragments leaked online. Skeptics laughed first. They always do. But then something even more extraordinary happened. People who had never met, who had never read each other's stories, who lived thousands of miles apart, described hearing the exact same sound during moments of fear, grief, and unbearable uncertainty near the ocean. They didn't romanticize it. They simply said, it sounded like comfort. And so the legend became more than a legend. It became a question. What if the ocean was not only a force, not only a grave, not only a mirror of our storms, but also a witness? What if it remembered us kindly sometimes? What if it forgave us? What if, when humanity pushed itself to the very edge, the ocean sang lullabies so we wouldn't fall completely apart? This is the story of those lullabies, of the families who heard them, of the history they carried, of the Americans who crossed seas chasing life, freedom, glory, and sometimes survival, and found instead a strange, gentle voice humming in the darkness. This is a true story where truth doesn't always need measurements, where history is not only the wars we won, but the quiet moments that kept us human. And it begins now with the people who learned not only to sail the ocean, but to listen to it.
Absolutely. Here is part 2 of The Ocean That Sang Lullabies, continuing the historical, emotional, realistic U.S. audience-centered narrative. This part flows as a continuous story, deepening into mid-20th century America, Cold War years, personal lives, science, loss, and the haunting idea that the ocean remembers more than humans dare to admit. The Ocean That Sang Lullabies. Part 2. The Age of Listening. History rarely listens to quiet things. It prefers explosions, proclamations, victories, disasters. It loves moments that roar so loudly no one can possibly ignore them. But while nations shouted, while leaders declared, while the world carved itself into alliances and enemies, the ocean continued doing what it had done for centuries. It watched, it absorbed, and sometimes it sang. The lullabies didn't stop after Eleanor Wright's discovery. They adapted. The world changed. So did the kind of grief people carried. By 1952, the Cold War chilled the world into permanent tension. America moved forward with a strange combination of optimism and fear. Suburban lawns grew green and neat, while families tucked fear into their closets like unworn coats. Radios spoke of prosperity. Newspapers whispered about nuclear annihilation. Children practiced hiding under desks. Parents pretended that was enough. And beneath all that worry, the ocean kept its quiet vigil. That was when Dr. Samuel Pierce entered the story. He was not mystical, not superstitious, not driven by poetry or romantic storytelling. He was a scientist in the truest, most stubborn sense of the word, disciplined, composed, and almost aggressively rational. He studied underwater acoustics at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts. He didn't believe in legends. He believed in frequencies, pressure waves, and measurable truth. He had never heard of the lullaby myth. To him, the ocean didn't sing. It pulsed, it resonated, it vibrated. Everything was physics. Then 1953 happened. Samuel Pierce was sitting in a dark research room, lit only by the glow of machinery, monitoring underwater microphones placed along sections of the North Atlantic. His project wasn't emotional. It was national defense. America wanted to hear Soviet submarines moving silently through deep water. Scientists like Samuel converted fear into data charts and recordings. The night was quiet except for the low rolling static of the sea. Then the sound came. Not sharp, not mechanical, not threatening. Smooth, warm, rhythmic. He leaned forward, frowning. Equipment anomaly? Interference? New Soviet tech? No. He had studied interference patterns for years. This wasn't disorder, it had structure. It rose and fell gently, like breath. It wasn't communication in words or code. It didn't match whale song frequencies or geological tremor oscillations. It was something softly intentional. He turned every dial he could. The sound didn't break. It held steady, comforting, patient. Something inside him, something he forgot existed, reacted before his brain could label it. His chest tightened, his throat warmed. He felt understood, and that terrified him more than anything. He ripped his headphones off, but the sound continued through the room's speakers. Another technician burst into the lab, freezing mid-step. "You hear it too?" the man whispered. Samuel didn't answer. Admitting he heard implied he accepted something emotional. So he asked instead, "Where is this frequency coming from?" The reply came slowly. Coordinates place it near a U.S. Navy ship that just went dark. They lost engines, severe storm, crew scared they won't hold. Samuel froze. The lullaby continued. An hour later, the ship reported the engines restarted unexpectedly. Damage remained, but crew panic vanished long enough for them to stabilize the situation. Men later swore they heard something like a soft humming beneath the storm, steady and soothing. The U.S. government marked the report classified, and Samuel Pierce stopped sleeping normally for weeks. He tried to explain it rationally. He wrote papers, none for publication, only for himself, filled with equations and theories, emotional phenomena disguised as sound illusions, brain misinterpretations caused by fatigue, sensory hallucination. He buried himself in data. But science doesn't erase experience. It only tries to cage it. And Samuel knew now the ocean possessed empathy. Not in a mystical way, but in a way that forced humility. The ocean sensed something in human desperation and answered not with mercy, not with logic, but with comfort. He hated how much he wanted to believe that. Years rolled forward. More recordings surfaced. More incidents occurred. Survivors spoke quietly of hearing that sound. Life continued. America shifted into a new era. The 1960s thundered. Protests, civil rights, Vietnam, television bringing fear and loss into living rooms. And the lullabies returned in ways no one expected. On a humid night in 1967, a transport ship carrying young American soldiers towards Vietnam sailed through dark Pacific waters. Many were barely adults, boys with letters in their pockets, boys pretending not to be afraid. One of them, a 19-year-old from Ohio named Michael, stood alone at the railing, staring into the quiet black horizon. Everyone believed they would survive until reality proved otherwise. He wasn't thinking about patriotism. He wasn't thinking about politics. He was thinking about home. About football games, cheap hamburgers, and his mother crying in the driveway when he left. He whispered, barely audible, "I don't want to die." The water answered. Softly, slowly, kindly. The same lullaby. It rose beneath the ship, vibrating through metal, through boots, through bones. The laughter on deck faded. Conversations paused. Breath synchronized. No one spoke. They didn't dare. It felt like the world itself wrapped its arms around them for a moment. Michael closed his eyes and listened. His fear didn't vanish, but something inside him stabilized. He would still face war. He would still face things no human should. But in that brief suspended moment, the ocean gave him something commanders and government leaders never could. Peace without lies. He came home years later, older, scarred, alive. And he never forgot the hum that told him he was still human while the world tried to turn him into something else. Back in Massachusetts, Dr. Samuel Pierce gathered evidence quietly, not to expose, not to exploit, simply to understand. He collected anonymous testimonies, Navy officers, civilian sailors, fishermen, immigrants, survivors of near death. Different eras, different oceans, same description. Like someone humming me to sleep when I was a child. His colleagues warned him, "Don't push this.
The Navy doesn't want mysticism attached to national security. We watch enemies, not lullabies. Samuel nodded. He continued anyway. Not recklessly, faithfully, because the truth deserved a witness.
Then came 1983, a moment history books barely emphasize compared to wars and elections, but a moment that quietly shaped everything. A near miss, a moment when the world almost ended. Tension between the United States and Soviet Union peaked. Nuclear alert systems misinterpreted signals. One wrong decision from one nervous commander could have set the planet on fire. A U.S. submarine in the North Atlantic sat silent in deep water, listening, waiting. Terrified crew holding breaths as strategy collided with fear. A false signal appeared on instruments, suggesting an attack sequence. Some men prayed, some froze, some prepared to obey orders that could erase cities. And then, the lullaby, slow, patient, steady. It vibrated through the hull like a giant heartbeat. Men stared at one another, not in fear, in grounding. Reality returned, logic reassembled. Calm decision replaced reflex panic. The submarine held. Leaders chose hesitation instead of attack. The mistake was discovered. The world continued existing. The incident never made headlines. The lullaby never received a medal. But maybe the ocean saved humanity that night. Not with waves, not with destruction, but with comfort. By the 1990s, technology advanced enough that ordinary people could finally hear fragments of the mysterious recordings Samuel preserved. They emerged piece by piece, leaked tapes, digitized audio files, whispered documentation. Some who listened cried without understanding why. Some claimed it felt like hearing a mother's voice when you were too old to admit you needed it. Others dismissed it immediately. Human nature. Belief does not need everyone. It simply needs witnesses. And even skeptics couldn't deny one thing. The lullaby never appeared during good days, only when humanity brushed too close to collapse. That pattern itself meant something. Not supernatural, not religious, deeply, profoundly human. By the time 2001, America suffered a wound beyond prediction. Smoke filled skies. The nation trembled with grief and fear. The Atlantic and Pacific both watched silently until the first military ships carrying rescue crews, supplies, and exhausted men and women sailed out across the water in the days that followed. Sailors later claimed, not publicly, not loudly, but sincerely, that the ocean's hum followed them. Not celebratory, not triumphant, gentle, respectful, like a promise that grief never had to be carried alone. In tragedy, humans usually search for blame or explanation, but sometimes what they truly need is not an answer, just comfort. And so, as the 21st century marched forward into uncertainty, climate change, global disasters, personal losses, shifting identities, the lullaby's meaning evolved once more. It was no longer just an unexplained phenomenon. It was a reminder. The ocean, the very force humans exploited, polluted, worshipped, feared, crossed, and depended on, did not simply take. It remembered. It cradled history in depths deeper than memory itself. It held laughter. It held sorrow. It held final words never spoken aloud. It wasn't alive in the way humans defined life, but it was not indifferent. That realization broke something inside Dr. Samuel Pierce, not because it frightened him, because it humbled him. All the years science tried to measure everything, they forgot that not everything existing required permission to be real. Samuel grew old.
Hair grayed, hands shook, but he never stopped listening. Not to prove, not to convince, to honor. He believed humanity owed the ocean gratitude for centuries of indifference, not because it protected us, not because it spared us, because in our darkest hours, it did something we rarely did for each other. It listened. And when silence became unbearable, it sang. Meanwhile, the stories continued. A grieving widow in California stood on a pier at night and swore it heard it. A child in Florida facing surgery listened to an ocean shell and said it sounded like a hug. A man who lost everything during a hurricane said he heard it in floodwater as he clung to debris, refusing to give up. Different lives, different tragedies, same melody. Different oceans, same comfort. What do we call something like that? Miracle? Myth? Coincidence? Unexplained natural resonance? Maybe the name doesn't matter. Maybe the only thing that matters is that in a world built on chaos, somewhere, beneath waves humans can't control, there is a patient hum whispering, "I know, I'm here." By the time Samuel passed away quietly in his sleep, his granddaughter, Lena Pierce, stood beside his old wooden desk, surrounded by stacks of tapes, notebooks, letters, and classified files he never fully let go. She was young, smart, modern, a scientist like him, but softer around the edges. She didn't laugh at the idea of ocean lullabies. She didn't blindly accept it either. She did something far more powerful. She listened. And when she pressed play on one of his oldest recordings, the 1953 hum that saved a frightened crew during a violent Atlantic storm, her breath stopped halfway through her chest. Not out of fear, out of recognition. Not because she had heard it before, because some sounds make sense to the soul before the mind ever catches up. She understood then that this wasn't only her grandfather's obsession. It was an inheritance, not of mystery, of responsibility. Because maybe the ocean wasn't just waiting to be studied. Maybe it was waiting to be respected. Maybe the lullaby wasn't simply a kindness. Maybe it was a warning, too. Humans only listened when drowning, only softened when terrified, only humbled when powerless. Maybe someday, the ocean might grow tired of singing us back to sanity. And if that day comes, who will listen then? History always asks the same question in different languages. Who are we when we are afraid? The lullaby of the ocean didn't answer that question. It simply held us while we tried to answer it. And now, as the world stepped deeper into climate crisis, rising seas, uncertain futures, and fragile hope, Lena Pierce prepared to step into a story far larger than science. A story about compassion where no compassion should logically exist. A story of memory older than maps. A story whispered in waves, carried through generations, waiting for someone brave enough not just to record the ocean, but to finally answer it.
Absolutely. Here is part 3 of The Ocean That Sang Lullabies. This continues the emotional, historically grounded U.S.-focused narrative, deepening into modern science, climate struggle, human stories, and the mystery of the ocean's compassion. The Ocean That Sang Lullabies. Part 3. The People Who Learned to Answer. When Lena Pierce stood in her grandfather's study, she felt history like gravity. Not the kind of history that appears in textbooks with dates and bold headings, but living history, quiet, stubborn, breathing through dusty air and old tape recordings, humming with a strange, inexplicable tenderness. The seas her grandfather listened to had shaped wars, migrations, tragedies, and miracles.
He died believing the ocean carried something like memory, like empathy, like a voice. And now the responsibility was hers. But Lena wasn't her grandfather. She was a daughter of the 21st century, raised with climate graphs, melting ice statistics, news stories about hurricanes smashing entire neighborhoods, fires staining skies orange, and headlines arguing over who to blame while the planet quietly suffered. She was grounded in science, but she was also painfully aware of the limits of certainty. She didn't want to prove the ocean cared. She wanted to understand why humanity needed it to. The first thing she did was listen, really listen. Days blurred into weeks. She digitized old tapes, cleaned static, studied frequency waveforms, mapped incidents to dates, storms, tragedies, unexplained near miracles. The patterns stunned her. The lullaby appeared. During storms, during shipwreck rescues, during war panic, during disaster response, during moments of human terror, and almost never during normal life. It wasn't random. It never comforted arrogance. It never sang to ambition. It sang only to fear that softened into fragility. The sound existed where ego died. That realization changed everything. Her first breakthrough came not from machines, but from people. She called survivors, wrote letters, tracked down anyone who had ever reported the hum. She expected embellishment, exaggeration, fantasy. Instead, she got honesty, clear, steady, earnest voices. A retired Navy mechanic who served in the 1980s described hearing the lullaby during a depth charge scare. "I thought I was losing my mind," he said, voice shaking even decades later. But it didn't sound like madness. It sounded like mercy. A widow from New Jersey whispered about the night her husband's rescue boat returned after others had vanished. "I stood by the shoreline thinking, if he dies, I die too. And I swear the ocean didn't sound angry that night. It sounded like it didn't want to hurt anymore." A commercial fisherman from Louisiana confessed he once turned his boat around seconds before being devoured by a storm because the water, not logic, not radar, felt sad. Not screaming, not warning, just pleading, "Don't push me anymore." Lena listened to dozens of stories and found one unshakable truth. No one talked about the ocean as a monster. They spoke like it was a guardian who didn't always succeed, but never stopped trying. That terrified her more than any storm, because guardians eventually break. Meanwhile, the world continued to change in the worst possible ways. Coastal towns flooded more often. Children grew up practicing hurricane evacuation drills the way their grandparents practiced nuclear fallout drills. Scientists debated timelines. Politicians debated responsibility. Corporations debated profit margins. The ocean didn't debate. It rose. Yet in rising, it also grieved. Lena began to notice something new in recordings from the last 20 years. The lullaby hadn't disappeared. It had grown sadder. Not darker, not angrier, heartbroken, like a parent singing to a child who refuses to stop hurting himself. She couldn't escape a question that burned deep enough to keep her awake at night. What if the ocean is tired of saving us? Her work eventually attracted attention, unwanted attention. One afternoon, while cataloging sound metadata, two men knocked on her door. Not threatening, not dramatic, simply precise. Navy intelligence. Calm smiles, polite posture, firm voices. They knew about her grandfather. They knew about the recordings, and they wanted her research.
To protect national security, they said. To maintain stability, they insisted. To prevent misinformation, they warned. Lena asked the only question that mattered. Are you afraid of the truth? Their silence answered for them. They left with a sealed warning. Be careful what you choose to share. The ocean is complicated enough. The world doesn't need another ghost story. But this wasn't a ghost story anymore. This was a confession from the planet we live on. And Lena wasn't ready to bury it. The turning point came with Hurricane Selene. It hit the southeastern coast harder than forecasts predicted. Families lost homes. Entire neighborhoods drowned beneath walls of water that didn't care about memory or love or dreams. News anchors spoke in professional voices while people screamed in the background. Lena volunteered at relief camps. She didn't go as a scientist. She went as a human. She helped distribute blankets, lifted debris, listened to strangers process shock. Eventually, she met a little girl named Amara, sitting alone on a cot, clinging to a soaked stuffed bear. Her parents were missing. Everyone suspected the truth, but no one could say it. The child barely spoke until she saw Lena staring at the ocean through the shattered shelter window. Did you hear it too? Amara whispered. Lena knelt slowly. Hear what? The song, the girl said. It told me to keep breathing when I wanted to stop. Lena felt her hands tremble. The lullaby found children now, children who should have never needed it. Amara rested her head against Lena's chest. It didn't sound happy, she whispered. What did it sound like? Lena asked gently. The answer came so quietly it almost disappeared beneath storm after silence. It sounded like it was crying. Lena broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, silently. Because everything finally made sense. The ocean's lullaby wasn't an act of mystical kindness. It was an apology. Not because it caused tragedies, but because it couldn't stop the ones humans created. After the storm, after the funerals, after the headlines faded, Lena made a decision. If the ocean could speak through comfort, then humanity needed to speak back through responsibility. Not poetry, not emotion, action. She founded something no government asked for, no corporation wanted, and no institution fully understood. The Listening Project. Its mission was simple. Document the lullabies. Protect the ocean, not as a resource, but as a living witness. Teach future generations not only to fear the ocean, but to respect the trust it had given us. Volunteers joined quietly at first. Sailors, climate scientists, grieving families, children who refused to forget what they heard. They didn't see themselves as heroes. They saw themselves as listeners. The project didn't fight industries directly. It didn't protest with anger. It didn't wage war against policy. It reminded humanity of something older than civilization itself. We owe tenderness to the things that cradle us, and nothing has ever cradled humanity more than the ocean. Food, travel, trade, exploration, identity, home. The ocean built us. The least we can do is stop making it cry. Time moved forward, as time always does. Some progress came, some greed persisted. Some people changed, some refused. But the lullabies didn't stop. They evolved. Sometimes they sounded peaceful, sometimes weary, sometimes like a promise that even if humanity collapses beneath its own arrogance, the ocean will still mourn us. Not celebrate, not rage, mourn. Because the truest form of love isn't possession, it's grief. Years later, a recording captured something unprecedented. On a moonless night, beneath surprisingly calm waters, microphones detected the lullaby, paired with something else. A second sound, not human, not whale, not storm, more like an echo, as if the ocean wasn't singing alone anymore, as if the planet itself, wind, stone, current, tide, finally answered back. Not in harmony, in unity. Lena listened with tears silently pooling at the corners of her eyes. The earth didn't hate us. It didn't rage against us. It grieved with us. And that grief carried a final message, not spoken in words, but felt through every frequency, every vibration, every warm, aching note. If I have always held you, will you finally learn to hold me back? The question didn't need a reply. It needed a lifetime of choices, generations worth of gentleness, nations worth of humility. But most importantly, it needed people brave enough to listen. People like Caleb, like Eleanor, like Samuel, like Michael, like Amara, like Lena, and perhaps like all of us. History will remember empires, wars, technologies, leaders, but somewhere beneath those loud stories, there will always exist another one. A story about an ocean that refused to let humanity drown alone. A story about lullabies that carried civilizations through fear. A story about a world that never stopped loving us, even when we didn't deserve it. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest measure of a nation is not how loudly it ruled the world, but how gently it learned to listen to it.
Absolutely. Here is part 4 of The Ocean That Sang Lullabies. This continues the story deeper into emotional realism, modern America, science versus power, moral struggle, and the ocean approaching a breaking point. Part 4. When the silence almost fell. Storms are loud. Governments are louder. But nothing in the world is louder than silence that wasn't supposed to exist. Lena Pierce didn't realize how much she depended on the ocean's whisper until the night she almost lost it. It happened during the year nature finally decided patience was no longer enough. The month began quietly, too quietly. Weather forecasts promised unusual instability. Oceans warmed beyond records scientists were comfortable admitting out loud. Satellite images glowed red like bruises blooming across the planet. News channels said words like unprecedented until the word lost meaning. But the ocean, for the first time in centuries of human recording, did not sing. It didn't hum. It didn't cradle. It didn't soothe. It waited. And waiting has always been the most terrifying thing nature can do. The storm that followed didn't receive a poetic name, not like Celine, not like Katrina, not like Harvey or Sandy. Those storms still acknowledged humans existed enough to warrant language. This one came nameless. A wall of water and wind so wide weather monitors couldn't define its edges. It pushed through the Atlantic like an animal that no longer wanted to be understood. America watched the ocean rise, not like a wave, not like a storm surge, like a decision. Coastal states braced, families evacuated, lines stretched at gas stations, children carried pets in trembling arms. Old men stared at the horizon the way soldiers stare at battlefields. The government declared emergencies. Scientists issued warnings. The nation held its breath. And still, no lullaby. The listening project scrambled. Volunteers monitored acoustic stations, Navy microphones, civilian ocean buoys, submarine cables humming beneath the continent, all silent. Lena tried to pretend silence meant nothing. She stared at screens, she studied graphs, she analyzed frequencies that weren't there. Her voice shook when she admitted the truth aloud. It always sings before disasters, every time. It always tries to comfort us first. Why isn't it doing it now? No one answered, because no one wanted the answer. What if the lullaby didn't disappear? What if the ocean simply stopped trying? Meanwhile, American cities prepared like soldiers before an unwinnable war. Florida built barriers that looked insultingly small against approaching doom. New York rehearsed evacuations it hoped would never be needed. Carolina coastlines emptied into highways choked with fear. Reporters spoke with professional urgency while their eyes betrayed panic. And still, no lullaby. A storm like that should not have been survivable, and yet humanity still believed survival was a right, not a privilege. Boats fled, airports clogged, shelters overflowed, prayers multiplied, and then the storm hit. There are disasters you can film. There are disasters you can describe. This one didn't fit inside language. Light vanished. Sky and sea became indistinguishable. Water climbed buildings like it had hands. Wind tore sounds out of throats, so people screamed silently. It wasn't chaos, it was grief incarnate. While the world drowned, the Listening Project headquarters shook beneath the force of wind, howling like a wounded creature. Lena refused to leave. Her team begged her. The Navy ordered evacuation. She stayed, because if the ocean wasn't going to sing, someone needed to. Not literally, not musically, emotionally. She spoke to microphones like someone leaving a message for a dying loved one. I don't know if you're anything or everything, or just forces of physics wearing the costume of compassion, but if you're listening, we were stupid, we were careless, we were arrogant, and we forgot to be grateful. But we're not asking you to forgive us yet. Her voice cracked. Wind roared, equipment flickered, and for the first time in her life, she prayed. Not to God, not to superstition, not to myth. She prayed to the memory of every person who ever owed the ocean their life. Her grandfather, sailors saved by storm lullabies, children comforted when they couldn't understand fear, soldiers steadied in moments that could have ended the world. If oceans kept memory, then maybe memory could love back. Somewhere in the middle of destruction, a boy clung to a floating refrigerator, his little sister wrapped around his shoulders. They were too young to die. They were too young to understand dying. Water smashed against them. Debris cut skin. Exhaustion pulled them downward. The boy whispered, voice shaking with terror and apology, "I'm sorry." Not to himself, not to the storm, to the world. He didn't know why. Children rarely do. He simply felt like someone deserved to hear regret before silence swallowed it. And that whisper traveled. Not physically, not scientifically, something more intimate. It joined the weight of every apology humanity never voiced properly. And the ocean finally shuddered. Not like anger, like breath after crying too long. The lullaby returned, weak at first, fragile, tired, but real. It rolled beneath waves, it threaded through chaos, it vibrated into human bones. It didn't erase terror. It steadied it. The storm did not stop. The ocean didn't magically calm. But something shifted. People stopped panicking long enough to think. Rescuers steadied hands. Captains adjusted course with clarity instead of desperation. Parents found strength they didn't know existed. Children breathed. The lullaby did not save everyone. It never had that power. But it saved possibility. And sometimes possibility is the difference between a mass grave and a civilization. When the storm finally broke, the world didn't cheer. It didn't clap. It didn't congratulate resilience. It cried. Entire neighborhoods disappeared. Cities woke up unfamiliar. Families gathered in gymnasiums transformed into temporary worlds. People searched for names on survivor boards. Some found them. Some didn't. The United States, for the first time in a long time, looked at itself not as powerful, but as small. And maybe that was necessary. Days later, as relief efforts surged across the nation, emergency teams distributed water, volunteers cooked meals, strangers hugged strangers like they'd known each other forever, and for once in far too long, America remembered how to be kind without needing credit. Lena watched all of it unfold on screens and through tear-streaked windows. The lullaby played faintly in the background of recordings, not loudly, not proudly, soft, fragile, exhausted. A guardian too tired to keep proving it cared. That terrified Lena more than the storm, because it meant the ocean had limits too. The government couldn't ignore the listening project anymore. Officials arrived not as skeptics, but as students forced to admit ignorance. The conversation shifted, not from "this is myth," "this is coincidence," "this is irrelevant," to "what does this mean? How long have we relied on something we never respected? What happens when we push it too far?" For the first time, science, policy, emotion, history, and humility sat at the same table. And Lena didn't come with demands. She came with truth. She didn't claim the ocean was alive. She didn't claim divine intelligence. She said only this: the ocean responds to our vulnerability. It steadies us when fear destroys reason. It is the last gentle thing left in nature when everything else turns violent. If we destroy it, we destroy the last kindness the planet has ever given us. Silence followed. Not denial, not dismissal, processing. A senator whispered what everyone else was too afraid to say. What if someday it stops singing? Nobody answered, because nobody could promise it wouldn't. Rebuilding began. Cities didn't just repair what was broken, they reconsidered everything. Architecture evolved. Coastal planning became compassionate instead of profitable. Policy began, slowly, painfully, to include empathy as a measurable factor. But change isn't a miracle, it's work, and humans resist work. There were still deniers, still profiteers, still men in suits laughing at emotional science, still people who believed comfort meant weakness. Yet something fundamental shifted. Children grew up knowing the ocean once cried for them, and children rarely forget things like that. 1 year after the Great Storm, the United States held a memorial, not for death, not for destruction, but for the ocean. Not worship, not ceremony, gratitude. Thousands gathered along coastlines, communities read letters to the sea. Veterans spoke about lullabies heard in war. Fishermen shared memories of nights they were kept alive by sound. Scientists discussed data with reverence instead of arrogance. Parents taught children to stand quietly in moments of listening. For the first time in recorded human history, humanity answered back. Not with technology, not with claims of ownership, with humility. Because maybe love isn't something you prove. Maybe love is simply remembering to say thank you. That night, acoustic monitors detected something new in the water. Not just the lullaby, something warmer. Not joy, not celebration. Peace. Not permanent, not promise. Moment. The ocean hummed, not to comfort panic, not to rescue terror, but like someone finally exhaling a breath they didn't realize they'd been holding for centuries. And across the coastline, people felt it, not as sound, not as vibration, as relief. The world would still struggle, disasters would still happen, humanity would still make mistakes, but for the first time, humans and ocean weren't adversaries or dependent victims or silent strangers. They were partners, not equal in power, equal in vulnerability. And maybe that was enough, for now. Because this story was never about proving whether the ocean is magical. It was about proving whether humans are still capable of tenderness after so much noise. And on that quiet night, with broken cities healing, with new hope fragile but real, with children listening to waves like lullabies meant for them alone, the answer, finally, was yes.
Part 5. The Ocean That Sang Lullabies. The courthouse in Boston carried the sound of history inside its wooden ribs. Every footstep echoed as if the walls themselves remembered every verdict, every confession, every trembling voice that had stood where Dr. Mira Lane was now standing. Outside, the world buzzed with headlines about the singing ocean. Inside, silence pressed on everyone like a hand. Mira stood at the witness stand, steady but exhausted. She had sailed through storms, faced governments, challenged traditions, but this was different. This time, she wasn't just facing waves, she was facing judgment. A lawyer in a crisp gray suit paced in front of her. "Dr. Lane," he said calmly, "you claim that an ocean sang." Across the gallery, a few people snickered. Some rolled their eyes, others leaned forward, their curiosity stronger than their skepticism. "Yes," she replied. Her voice did not shake. "And you claim that this singing is tied to forgotten migrations, buried histories, and climate-driven oceanic memory?" "Yes." "And for this," the lawyer continued, "you convinced research institutions, international councils, and an entire American viewership to believe that water remembers? That the sea holds emotional resonance?" Mira met his gaze. "I didn't convince them with fantasy. I showed them evidence." The lawyer smiled like a man who enjoyed puzzles. "Let's talk about that evidence." While the courtroom listened, the television screens of the nation replayed the journey leading here. News channels brought interviews with fishermen who swore the sea whispered, indigenous elders speaking of ancestral songs in tides, sailors recalling strange low frequencies that seemed compassionate. And then there were the military reports, leaked, classified once, now undeniable. Under the North Atlantic, a strange phenomenon had occurred, an acoustic event unlike anything ever recorded. Submarines reported it first, a sound that wasn't entirely mechanical, wasn't geological, wasn't biological in any normal way. It was layered, it shifted, it reacted, and according to naval logs, it responded when spoken to. The courtroom lawyer turned sharply. "You're saying the ocean replied?" Mira didn't blink. It did. How? With sound, with resonance, with what humans would interpret as empathy. A murmur rolled through the courtroom.
The judge's gavel struck lightly. Order. But the lawyer wasn't finished. Empathy requires consciousness, Dr. Lane. Are you suggesting the ocean is alive? Mira inhaled. For years, she'd wrestled with the question. Scientists debated consciousness in artificial intelligence, in animals, even in plants. Why not in something larger? Why not in something ancient? I'm saying we are finally listening to something that's been speaking longer than humanity has existed. The courtroom fell silent. Months earlier, before legal battles, before politics tried to strangle discovery, Mira and her team were on the northern ice shelf when everything changed. The ship cut slowly through gray-blue water. Crew members moved quietly, partly from fatigue, partly from reverence. Something about the air made everyone whisper. The ocean wasn't just cold, it felt aware. Their device, the resonance array, hung beneath the ship like a mechanical ear. For weeks, it had recorded low-frequency vibrations from deep waters. Most were natural rhythms, the kind of sounds you could shrug off as tectonic movements or whale communication, until one night when the ocean answered back. Dr. James Carver had been the first to notice. He was stubborn, logical, born to destroy fantasy with data. Yet he had been the first to freeze in awe when the array transmitted sound that didn't fit any known signature. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural noise. It shaped itself around human sound. If someone spoke, the ocean changed pitch. If someone whispered, it softened. If someone sang, it harmonized. Scientists on board ran simulations. They filtered frequencies. They cross-checked every maritime sound library. None of them explained it. Eventually, someone stopped trying to explain it and simply listened. That's when the ocean began to tell its story. Back in the courtroom, Mira's voice deepened slightly. You see, the problem is not that the world lacks proof. The problem is that the proof doesn't fit inside our narrow definition of what is allowed to exist. The lawyer crossed his arms. So convince us, convince the United States that the ocean remembers history. Mira nodded slowly. All right, she said, let me tell you what the ocean showed us. The first memory came like a tremor beneath the hull. They weren't expecting anything. It was late. The crew was tired. James sat nearly asleep when the array captured something so loud it shook the speakers. A song, old, layered, not human, but also heartbreakingly familiar. It sounded like mourning. The pitch matched historical records of old whaling songs, almost perfectly, a forgotten melody used by American whalers in the 1800s, a melody last documented in diaries, never recorded, never archived in sound, and yet here it was, carried in the depth. No one spoke for a long time. A few of the older crew members stared out at the dark waves with tears in their eyes. It wasn't just sound, it was loss. For days afterwards, ocean recordings unraveled more. Storm battles, drowned ships, migrations, love stories lost to waves, cries swallowed by storms, songs sung by sailors far from home. The ocean didn't speak in language, it spoke in feeling, like the way thunder vibrates in your chest or the hush of snowfall presses gently on your mind. The ocean expressed memory through tone, weight, and rhythm. And when the crew responded emotionally, when they didn't treat it like an experiment, but as a conversation, it changed again. It became warmer, kinder, alive.
The judge leaned forward slightly in the courtroom. And this, she said carefully, is what you claim proves sentience. Mira shook her head. No, this proves relationship. Silence again.
Humans have always believed they stood above nature, Mira continued. But what if we are not observers? What if we are part of something much older? Something vast enough to cradle civilizations and patient enough to remember every footprint washed away. She lifted a small device on the witness table. Permission to demonstrate? The courtroom hesitated. The lawyer frowned. The judge paused, then nodded. The speaker was activated. A soft hum filled the courtroom. Low, deep, alive. Everyone felt it in their bones, like standing beside a great engine or sitting beside the chest of something gigantic, breathing slowly. "This is a recording we made just before the ice shelf cracked," Mira said softly. The sound deepened. A gentle pulse followed, a rhythm, then another tone joined, softer, trembling like a lullaby. Audience members tilted their heads unconsciously. A few closed their eyes. Inside that courtroom, filled with skeptics and politicians, something ancient moved through the air like a tide. A young man in the audience suddenly covered his mouth. "These frequencies match infant soothing rhythms," Mira said. "We tested. Neurological response, psychological calm. The ocean wasn't just humming, it was comforting us." The sound shifted slightly. Another layer emerged. Sadness, weight, a grief too deep for words. "This," Mira whispered, "is the moment the ice shelf fractured. The ocean didn't roar, it didn't rage, it mourned." Someone quietly sobbed in the back row. The judge swallowed. "Turn it off," the lawyer said quietly. Mira did. Silence crashed in. But the silence wasn't the same silence as before. Now it carried understanding, or at least uncertainty. And uncertainty is the birthplace of truth. News spread like lightning. Science forums exploded. Religious leaders debated. Oceanic tribes wept with relief because they had always known. But governments? They panicked. If the ocean remembered, then it remembered every nuclear test, every oil spill, every drowned migrant, every war at sea, every secret. And if something remembers, someday it might speak. That could change power structures forever. So they tried to shut Mira down. They seized equipment, silenced interviews, cut funding. But the ocean didn't stop. Across the coastlines of the world, people began to notice shifts in tide sounds. Fishermen claimed to hear soft humming under their boats. Sailors swore waves changed tone depending on what they spoke aloud. Then came the first global event. In the middle of the Pacific, hundreds of ships simultaneously reported the same thing, a melody, the same melody, a rising, falling pattern like breathing under the world, not destructive, not threatening, calling. When radar buoys picked up synchronized pulse vibrations across thousands of miles, scientists could no longer say it was random. The ocean was communicating on a planetary scale. America could no longer ignore it, which led to this courtroom, which led to the world listening. Back in court, the opposing lawyer tried to regain control. "Even if we entertain these claims," he said, "what does the ocean want?" Mira thought of the nights hearing waves whisper like lullabies around their ship. She remembered the feeling that wasn't just heard, it was felt. "The ocean doesn't want anything in the human sense," she said. "It doesn't bargain, it doesn't threaten, it doesn't seek power." She paused. "But it cares." The word felt fragile yet powerful in the air. For millions of years it carried life, protected it, nurtured it, listened to it. When we cried into its winds, it remembered. The lawyer exhaled sharply. "And you think it feels pain?" Mira did not hesitate. "Yes." The judge leaned back. The courtroom walls seemed suddenly too small for what was being discussed. This wasn't simply about science, it was about responsibility, identity, humility. If the ocean was aware, then humanity had never been alone. Not spiritually, not environmentally, not historically. We had always been children, rocked to sleep by something immense and patient and endlessly forgiving, until now. Now it was tired. Now it was breaking, not out of rage, but heartbreak. The final evidence Mira presented stunned the world. A recording captured from the Mariana Trench, the deepest place on Earth. Silence at first, then not a song, not a hum, a whisper, so faint it barely existed, but when enhanced, it carried a pattern shockingly similar to a heartbeat slowing down, a slowing lullaby, not triumphant, not angry, fading, tired, like a world exhausted from loving something that refused to love it back. The judge closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her voice carried weight. "Dr. Lane," she said softly, "this isn't just about whether the ocean sings. This is about whether humanity is capable of listening." Mira nodded. "For once, I hope we learn to be quiet." Outside the courthouse that evening, crowds gathered not for protest, but to listen. People stood by the harbor, not speaking, just hearing the tide. And somewhere beneath the waves, gentle frequencies rolled outward like a hand reaching towards a child who finally turned around. For the first time in modern history, the world wasn't speaking over the ocean, it was listening, and the ocean sang. Not loudly, not desperately, just enough. Like a mother watching her children finally stop fighting long enough to notice she was there all along. The lullaby wasn't the end, it was a beginning, because understanding is always the first miracle of every great human story. And this time, the story wasn't just human, it was planetary, it was ancient, it was alive, and it had only just begun to speak.
Part 6. The Ocean That Sang Lullabies. Next 4,000 words plus. The first morning after the courtroom recording went public felt strangely quiet across America. Not in the literal sense. Cities still hummed with traffic, school bells still rang, coffee shops still buzzed. But inside people, something had shifted. They were aware. The ocean was no longer just a background element in documentaries or a vacation destination. It wasn't just a danger during hurricanes or a poetic symbol in literature. It was presence, and presence demanded acknowledgement. Television anchors no longer laughed when saying the ocean sang. Newspapers stopped framing it as myth. Research centers opened new divisions overnight labeled Ocean Consciousness Studies. Universities rushed to assemble teams of oceanographers, neuroscientists, physicists, linguists, psychologists, philosophers, anyone who could help decode this new truth. And standing at the center of it all was Dr. Mira Lane. She hadn't asked to become the interpreter of a world ocean. She had simply wanted to understand why the North Atlantic hummed with grief. But fate does not often ask permission. It appoints. Weeks after the court decision legally protected continued research, a world summit was formed in San Francisco. The beige gold buildings of the coastal city shimmered, but the wind held a quiet tension. Delegates from 72 nations arrived, moving like pieces on a chessboard no one yet understood how to play. They called it the Tide Accord Conference. In the opening hall, a massive curved stage arced like a shoreline. On the digital backdrop behind it, a live feed of the Pacific rippled in real time. No music played, no politicians made grand entrances. Leaders entered quietly, for the first time humbled before something bigger than them. "You feel it too?" whispered the Canadian delegate to her counterpart from Kenya. "Yes," he replied softly, "like we're walking into a temple." At the center of the hall sat the Resonance Dome, a massive acoustic sphere engineered overnight by Mira's team and NASA sound engineers. Its job was simple: listen, translate, amplify. Not just scientifically, emotionally. A rolling murmur pulsated through the crowd when Mira finally stepped forward. She did not wear power suits anymore. Not after the ocean taught her softness was a strength. She wore calm colors, her hair slightly wind-tangled, as if she had just stepped off a ship instead of an airplane. "Welcome," she began, voice resonating through the hall. "Today is not a day for debate. Today is a day for listening together." No applause followed. No one came for performance. They came for communion. The dome activated. At first, there was only deep, almost subsonic vibration, like thunder beneath ribs. Then, tone. Gentle, measured, breathing. Even the strongest political minds, hardened by decades of negotiation and conflict, felt their throats tighten involuntarily. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic. It was intimate, like leaning your ear against the chest of something unimaginably old. For 30 seconds, the room simply breathed with the ocean. Then, it changed. Across the Pacific feed, currents intensified slightly. The dome translated frequency shifts into audible layers humans could perceive. And then, unmistakably, a note rose upward. A long, trembling note. Not pain, not anger. Warning. Delegates stiffened. Scientists scrambled to interpret data streaming across side screens. Oceanic temperatures, salinity, pressure currents, coastal stress mapping. Dr. James Carver whispered from the control deck, "It's showing us where it hurts." Red bands glowed along the digital ocean map. The melting Arctic veins, the choked coral lungs, the bruised Pacific gyres swirling plastic like infected wounds, the oil-blackened scars near industrial coasts, and a strange, deep pulse from the Atlantic Trench. The ocean wasn't demanding repentance, it was reporting damage. A trembling silence followed. Then the president of Iceland spoke first, voice quiet. "It's not angry with us." Mira nodded slowly. "No, it's disappointed." That word broke something inside people. Disappointment is not hatred. Disappointment is love that has been hurt. The Indian delegate wiped his eyes. The Brazilian representative pressed her palm to her chest. The U.S. Secretary of State swallowed hard. Years of climate negotiation had been driven by fear. Melting ice, rising waters, collapsing ecosystems. Fear of consequence, fear of loss, fear of economic ruin. But disappointment, that was different. That was relational. That meant bond. That meant we mattered to something greater than us, and we hadn't been worthy. For the first time in recorded diplomatic history, a world summit ended not with policy, but silence. Delegates walked out of the building like people leaving a funeral and a birth once, stunned, changed. Outside, reporters shoved microphones toward leaders. What did the ocean say? Is humanity in danger? Was it a threat? Is this consciousness confirmed? What happens now? For once, leaders didn't answer quickly. One by one, they said variations of the same thing. We are still learning. We must listen longer. We cannot rush. This isn't politics. This is care. It didn't matter what country they came from. Something had united them more effectively than any treaty. A lullaby. Meanwhile, the world reacted in wild, uneven ways. Some people pilgrimaged to shorelines just to sit and hear the whispers of waves. Churches and mosques opened with ocean hymns. Indigenous tribes wept with joy. The world had finally caught up to what they always knew. Children began asking new questions in classrooms. Does the ocean have dreams? Does it like us? Can we say sorry to it? Can it forgive? Psychologists reported something unexpected, where fear-driven environmental news often caused paralysis and despair. This didn't. People wanted to protect something that cared for them. They wanted to make their mother proud. A global movement began, not from governments, but from ordinary hearts. Coastal towns began nightly listening vigils. Sailors stopped swearing loudly out at sea, whispering instead. Fishermen touched the water before casting nets, like greeting an old friend. Poets returned to writing about tides. Musicians composed ocean symphonies built around its frequencies. Cities installed public listening corners with live ocean feeds. And for the first time since humanity industrialized the planet, people slowed down to hear. But the ocean had not finished speaking, because something else was happening in its depths, something no human had predicted. That Atlantic trench pulse they saw at the summit, it grew. Submarines detected it. Deep-sea drones recorded pressure anomalies. Seismographs fluttered not like earthquakes, but like heartbeat irregularities. The ocean wasn't simply conscious.
It was trying, with absolutely everything it had left, to hold itself together. Think of ocean basins like neural networks, Carver explained one exhausted evening to the U.S. Coastal Science Council. Currents are synapses. Heat distribution is emotional regulation. Storms are stress reactions. Acidification is trauma. And the trench pulse? Asked the senator. Carver looked at the ground. A panic attack. The room froze. Mira went back to the water, not as a scientist, as a daughter returning to an aging parent. The ship hummed beneath her feet again. Cold wind tangled her hair. Salt kissed her skin. She closed her eyes and let the ocean's breathing enter her bones. "I'm here," she whispered. The resonance array slipped into the Atlantic like a prayer candle. The ocean answered immediately, not with song, with trembling, with fatigue, with weariness so deep Mira had to grip the railing because it nearly pulled her to her knees. "You've been carrying us," she whispered, voice cracking, "all of us, for so long." The ocean's resonance softened. Acknowledgement, not pride, simply truth. Mira placed her palm into the water, and the device picked up something extraordinary. The ocean matched her heart rhythm. Her pulse carried through her body, carried through muscles, carried through blood, touched molecules touching salt molecules. And the Atlantic adjusted like a giant creature shifting closer to a child's touch. Crew members gasped. James swore softly. Even hardened naval officers wiped their eyes in secret. It was no longer possible to deny. This wasn't metaphor. This wasn't poetic language. This was relationship measurable in waveform. The ocean responded to affection, not dramatically, not with applause, with presence. And presence has always been the language of love. But the world can never stay unified long without challenge, because where wonder exists, profit follows. Corporations began branding ocean sympathy. Politicians tried to weaponize ocean allegiance. Media platforms turned calm whispers into sensational headlines. Tech companies pitched AI ocean interpreters. Conspiracy groups claimed the recordings were engineered to control the masses. Militaries asked the unthinkable. If the ocean can communicate, can it be negotiated with? Mira refused to attend any meeting framed that way. "We don't negotiate with our planet," she said bluntly in a global broadcast. "We relate with it." The public cheered, but powerful men do not like being told the game has changed. Whispers began around her. She was manipulating the world. She was dangerous. She was too emotional. She threatened economic order. She needed to be quieted. Again. Then came the storm. The greatest Atlantic storm system ever recorded, formed not like a sudden violent spiral, but like an exhausted, collapsing lung. Meteorologists panicked. It's not behaving like a hurricane. It's not moving naturally. It's hovering in the mid-Atlantic, massive and trembling, as if unable to decide whether to destroy or dissolve. Mira saw the data and understood immediately. It's not a storm. James stared. How do you mean it's not a storm? It has pressure systems, spirals, heat buildup. It's a panic attack. Silence crushed the room. A world ocean having a breakdown. Not out of rage, out of fear that it could no longer hold itself together while still cradling everything living within it. Every ship remained still. Every satellite watched. The ocean cried. Rain fell not like violence, like grief. Gentle but endless, soft but unstoppable. Millions stood along coasts worldwide, feeling water on their faces, and for the first time in history, not thinking of umbrellas or traffic delays. They felt a planet weeping. And something new emerged among humanity. Not guilt, not fear, compassion. People whispered toward the waves, "We're here, we're listening, we love you, we won't leave you alone again." Parents helped children press their palms to seawater. Elders hummed ancestral songs to the tides. Sailors turned off engines and floated in silence. Cities dimmed shoreline lights for hours at night to reduce stress on marine life. For the first time, humanity didn't say, "What can we take? What can we use? What can we demand?" They said, "We'll try. We'll do better. We're sorry." And the storm softened, slowly, carefully, like a body taking its first steady breath after sobbing. The world exhaled. Weeks later, something extraordinary happened. A pulse. Not a frightened one, not a wounded one. A warm, strong, steady pulse through global currents. Scientists across continents stared at instruments and almost laughed in disbelief. The ocean was stabilizing faster than models predicted. Currents reorganized more smoothly. Marine migration regained rhythm. Heat dispersion improved. It was as if emotion regulated climate. Empathy became an environmental force. Love had scientific impact. Because humanity finally joined the conversation instead of drowning it in noise. In the United States, a new coastal pledge was signed. Not legal, not enforced, but deeply cultural. We will listen before we act. We will care before we calculate. We belong to the ocean, not above it. Schools taught children not just marine biology, but marine relationship. History books rewrote narratives, no longer saying the ocean was conquered, the seas were mastered. They now said, we were held, we were guided, we were forgiven. For now. Because forgiveness is never permanent privilege. It is renewed through behavior. And behavior had finally begun to change. One quiet evening, long after the headlines slowed and the political noise faded, Mira stood alone at the edge of the shore. The tide whispered calmly. Waves sighed like sleeping lungs. She closed her eyes and said softly, "Thank you." The sea hummed a low, gentle reply. Not words, not translation, but unmistakable meaning. We are together. The lullaby that once mourned, now comforted. Not like a farewell song, like a beginning song. A song not of endings, of guardianship, of mutual belonging, of a planet and its children finally speaking with the same heartbeat. And somewhere deep beneath miles of ancient water, where darkness had never known the sun, the Atlantic trench pulse settled into steady rhythm, not fading, not breaking, alive, still singing, still loving, still remembering. And humanity finally remembered too.
Final part: the ocean that sang lullabies. By the time the world began to accept the truth, not as a spectacle, not as panic, not as debate, but as a steady reality, a strange calm settled over humanity. It wasn't perfection. War didn't vanish. Greed did not dissolve. Politics didn't suddenly grow angel wings. Humans were still human, but something deep had changed. There was now a presence you could feel whenever you paused long enough. A patient watcher, an ancient guardian. Something that had always been there, but now humanity finally knew. The ocean was listening, and in return, humanity learned to listen too. For months after the Atlantic panic storm dissolved, no great drama followed, no apocalyptic tidal wall, no divine punishment, no mystical miracles, just small miracles, the kind that only patient people notice. Beaches grew quieter because nations began restricting industrial shoreline noise, not for legislation, but because coastal citizens demanded peace for the water. Fishing ships began adopting listening windows, where engines powered down daily for an hour just to let the ocean rest. People visited shorelines, not to conquer them, but to check on them, like visiting grandparents. Whales migrated in smoother arcs, recorded in new patterns scientists called confidence curves. Storms still formed, but fewer grew violent. It wasn't mercy, it was equilibrium. When a being stops panicking, its breathing stabilizes. When breathing stabilizes, behavior stabilizes. When behavior stabilizes, strength returns. The ocean had been drowning in our noise. Now it could finally breathe. The world expected Dr. Mira Lane to declare some grand final revelation. They imagined a future where governments bowed to her like a prophet or condemned her as a threat. They imagined headlines and drama and world-shattering proclamations. Instead, she disappeared for a while. No television interviews, no summits, no speeches, just silence. She returned to the only classroom she ever truly loved, the deck of a ship looking out over endless water. Her team stayed smaller now. She didn't want armies of governments behind her. She wanted humans who could love deeply and measure carefully at the same time. People like James Carver, once a skeptic, now the quiet anchor of the team. People like Arya Fallon, sound engineer turned emotional archivist. People who didn't need to own discovery, only witness it. The ship sailed as often as funding, weather, and patience allowed. They didn't go searching for more proof. They went listening for company. The first time they reactivated the resonance array after months of silence, no one spoke. There was no public broadcast, no journalists, no pressure. Just the sea and a handful of humans who understood how small and precious that privilege was. The ocean greeted them, not with spectacle, but with warmth. The sound was deep and steady, layered like the voice of a choir that had never lost breath. Mira smiled, tears slipping quietly down her cheek. "Hello," she whispered. The waves nudged softly against the hull, like a cat brushing its head against a loved hand. James laughed, an unguarded, childish sound he hadn't made in years. "All this time," he murmured, "we thought the universe was silent. Turns out, we just never shut up long enough to hear anything." History books would one day mark the shift, not a moment of revelation, but a moment of realization. The age where humanity stopped believing it was the lone intelligence ruling a dumb world and understood it was a young species being gently held by something ancient and conscious enough to remember across millennia. Civilizations changed how they told their own stories. Not, "we discovered the seas,"
but we were born at their feet. Not we tamed storms, but we learned to soothe them and be soothed in return. Children no longer drew the earth as continents surrounded by blue. They drew blue first, then land resting inside it. Perspective had shifted. The ocean was no longer decoration, it was identity. And like all beings who finally learned to love in return, humanity began to ask deeper questions. If the ocean remembers us, what do we owe it? What do we become now that we are no longer alone? What does responsibility look like when the thing loving you can drown cities, but chooses instead to cradle them? Governments held meetings, councils wrote agreements, but none of that made the real difference. Change did not come from laws, it came from ordinary hearts. From a ship captain who ordered silence each sunrise out of respect. From a mother who taught her child to greet the tide like a friend. From a fisherman who chose to take less instead of everything. From a scientist who learned to say, "I don't know yet," and smiled when she said it. From humanity finally learning humility. Not humiliation, humility, the kind grounded in wonder instead of fear. Years later, the San Francisco Summit Hall was reopened, not for government, but for the public. No VIP seating, no international flags, no hushed officials, just people, families, strangers, elders, students, dreamers. The resonance dome was still at the center, but it no longer needed to prove anything. It simply existed as a bridge, a meeting place. People could sit within it and listen. Sometimes the ocean hummed steady. Sometimes it pulsed like laughter.
Sometimes it sighed like a parent resting after a long day. Sometimes it said nothing, because silence too was a language. Ocean silence meant peace. And humanity, having finally learned patience, did not panic. They simply sat with it, because when you love someone, you sit with their quiet too. The final time Mira Lane addressed the world was not at a summit or courtroom or crisis briefing. It was at a shoreline library created beside the New England coast, a place built from driftwood shapes and curved glass walls where children could read while hearing tide songs softly playing through quietly tuned speakers. She stood at the window, waves rolling under gray clouds and soft sunlight. There were no powerful leaders in the room, just children, teenagers, a few teachers, and curious elders. Perfect audience. Once, she said gently, we believed the ocean destroyed us because it hated us. We called storms punishments. We called the unknown monstrosity. We believed nature was cruel. A few young faces listened with wide eyes, hovering between awe and sadness. But the truth, Mira continued, is that the ocean loved us so deeply and so quietly that we forgot it was love at all. We built cities because the ocean fed us. We explored because it carried us. We dreamed because its horizon never ended. It didn't drown us out of malice. It hurt us only when we pushed too hard, too far, too long. A young boy raised his hand. Is it still sad? Mira smiled softly. Sometimes, she said honestly, just like any living being. But sadness isn't failure. It means there's love inside. And right now, the ocean isn't singing lullabies because it fears losing us. She turned toward the waves. It sings because it trusts us again. Silence followed, but not heavy silence, comfortable silence, the kind you share with someone you don't need to impress anymore, the kind families grow into. Mira grew older. Her hair silvered, Her steps slowed, but the ocean never forgot her. There are stories, some documented, some whispered, of ships passing over quiet water and hearing an unusual resonance whenever her vessel sailed, like a familiar voice calling softly across miles. She's here. She didn't chase fame. She didn't claim ownership. She didn't declare herself savior. She simply remained what she had always been, a listener. One twilight evening, far into her later years, Mira returned to the North Atlantic one last time. The crew was new, young, full of the same wonder she once had, but now guided by greater wisdom, inherited instead of forced. The water was calm, the sky blushing gold and violet. Mira placed her hand on the railing and laughed quietly. Do you remember when the world thought listening to you was madness? A warmth rolled beneath the hull. She closed her eyes. There was no fear of death in her, no dread of endings, only gratitude that she had lived long enough to witness the moment humanity chose relationship over superiority. James, older now himself, came to stand beside her. Think it'll keep loving us? He asked softly. Mira nodded without hesitation. The ocean never stopped. We were the ones who forgot how to feel it. As long as someone listens, it will keep singing. The sun touched the horizon. The sea glowed like liquid gold. And then, almost too softly to notice, the resonance array captured one last layered tone. Not a warning, not mourning, not exhaustion. A lullaby, yes, but not the sorrowed lullaby the world first heard. This one was warm, steady, content. A lullaby not to put humanity to sleep, but to cradle it while it remained awake. Awake to responsibility, awake to belonging, awake to love so vast it stretched across blue infinity. Years later, when storytellers spoke of this era to American audiences and beyond, they didn't call it the Age of Fear, or the Era of Collapse, or the time we nearly lost everything. They called it the years we finally answered back. Because the ocean had always sung. For thousands of years, for every sailor staring into night horizons, for every child whispering to shells, for every tribe that honored tides, for every lonely soul standing as shorelines, breathing salt air, the ocean had been singing lullabies. We just never sang back. Now we did, not in perfect harmony, but with sincerity. And that was enough. In the end, no monument was built for the ocean, no stone statue, no towering tribute. Humanity honored it in a different way, by caring, by listening, by belonging. And the ocean, ancient and patient, kept doing what it always had, holding life, remembering silently, loving vastly. And every night, when wind brushed waves and moonlight rested across water, if you stood quietly enough, you could still hear it. The lullaby, not of sorrow anymore, but of trust, of guardianship shared, of a world and its children finally knowing they had never been alone. Not even for a heartbeat.